I'm Heidi Hutner, and this is Coffee with H2. Today we'll be talking with Wahleah Johns, who's the co-director of the Black Mesa Water Coalition. Hi, Wahleah, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. So we're talking to you from Oakland.
Yes.
And could you tell us a little bit about your organization and what you all are doing?
Our organization started to address water depletion about 15 years ago in our communities, our tribal communities, Navajo and Hopi. We were a student organization, and we had found out a lot of information with the data that was released that showed how much Peabody Coal Company was using our groundwater to transport coal. And I think once we, as students, learned about how much water they were using in comparison to all the other communities combined, was just outrageous. So that's kind of the seed of a lot of our activism, a lot of our ideas of how we can create solutions around the way that we are managing our resources. And that had to do with a lot of community organizing, translating this information to our community members, and really working on a just transition plan, which is a lot of our work today.
So tell me about the Just Transition Plan. I'm assuming it has to do with kind of climate justice and preparing for issues around climate change.
Yeah, it's really preparing ourselves for, taking the necessary steps to plant those seeds again or water them that have been there for a really long time, especially in indigenous communities like ours. We've been heavily, we're a bunch of, we've been a lot of farmers. We've been a lot of ranchers, and we've had an economy before the cash economy came into our communities. Money is really new to our people. It's less than 100 years old. And before that, we have these strong traditions of sustaining community, sustaining ourselves for thousands of years. And what did that look like? And how do we reclaim that? And how do we start to implement these practices that could actually add value to the food that we grow, the animals that we are raising, and the restoration and the conservation efforts to maintain our lands, but also our cultural lifeways. The other piece is looking at, we live right behind one of the major coal mining operations in the Southwest. And, as we are hearing a lot about Peabody, or other coal companies starting to go file for bankruptcy, what does a transition look like if they shut down, for example, one of the coal mines? And so that's what we started to do, is look at the alternative solutions and looking at solar energy as a possibility to power our communities.
And how's that working? Are you involved with bringing in solar power?
Yes, actually, that's my current position at the Black Mesa Water Coalition. I'm a solar program director, which is focused on looking at how do we implement solar in our communities at residential, off-grid, or community buildings, or even looking at utility scale or microgrids. And so that's been a lot of my research lately, and also implementation, is trying to connect this, clean energy movement, the 100% movement to, remote and rural communities like ours. And I think that's the nice thing to be based here in the Bay, is that there's so much innovation, creativity, and opportunities to connect to, a broader movement that is going towards 100% renewable energy, and being able to connect that to, our communities is pretty fascinating.
Are you working with Mark Jacobson and his Solutions Project?
No, I am not, but I do know of it. I'm a big fan of the Solutions Project. We have, crossed paths with other people like Sarah Shanley Hope, who's a good friend of mine and was a neighbor. And yeah, so I think there's a lot of overlap. And, for us, we've been talking about solar for a really long time, for over 10 years, especially when one of the power generating stations that our coal supply closed. It also closed one of the coal mining operations in Black Mesa. And I think that was the first time we really looked at what is it going to take to be able to, for example, repurpose these brownfield lands. There's like 14,000 acres of lands that have gone through coal mining. Can we repurpose these lands for solar, for example? Because there's existing infrastructure there. There's roads, there's water, and there's power lines. And this could be an opportunity for our tribal communities to sell power, in the region, to provide power for our own communities, but also, as a way to generate a fund that will go back to, community benefits. And I think that's the big piece, is how do we, do opposite of what Peabody has done in their type of operation in our communities, which is always taking. Mm-hmm. And what does that design look like in that process to really engage people and community in our tribal nations?
So just to break that down, it sounds really fascinating. So you're talking about taking land that Peabody has essentially polluted, and it's brownfields now. So that's a polluted space, toxic space. And you're, forgive me if I'm getting this, I hope I'm getting this right, and you're talking about turning that land into solar farms. And then you would
Yes.
sell the energy outside the community and also use it for within the community?
Yes, I mean, these are options. Like, we have so many abandoned lands throughout the US. I mean, it's not just in our community, it's just
Right.
an idea that we started to research, is like, what are some opportunities for communities like ours that are heavily dependent on a coal economy, heavily dependent on coal jobs? And what does that future look like for them if we were to transition towards solar? What would the community benefits look like? And what is, all the steps to do a solar project. And that's basically what, we've been trying to learn, is like, it's almost like looking at it as a developer,
Mm-hmm.
and being able to, articulate this in, really plain language, and even translate it into Navajo. So we really are demonstrating, like, we're building the capacity of our people, and we're building the capacity of our community to make these decisions and to have the right to make these type of decisions. And I think, right there is the core, is like, there's been really no, as Indigenous peoples, this used to be all of our land,
Mm-hmm.
And we, with colonization in the past 500 years, slowly we've seen our rights be removed from these lands, lands taken from us, and waters taken from us. Companies like Peabody having more power and rights over land and water. And how do we, reverse this and work with utilities and, the powers that be to really push and implement a just transition plan? But that was one idea. The other that we're working on as far as solar is, we have 18,000 homes on our Navajo reservation right now that do not have access to power. These are families that live in really remote areas that cannot be serviced by power lines. And they make up 75% of the unelectrified homes here in the US. And while I'm here in the Bay, I'm hearing all these amazing opportunities and initiatives that are happening in, other countries where there's no access to power, and there's this global movement trying to electrify, people who don't have access to energy. And yet, here in our own backyard in the US, we have these, situations like within our communities where people don't have access to power. Mm-hmm. 40% of our people don't have running water, and so these are the conditions. I mean, this is just one tribal nation of many that have been forgotten. And for me, coming from there, it's that's been my, passion, is to get something back. And that's what Just Transition is about, is being able to, we provide 5 million homes with affordable power in California, in Nevada, and in Arizona. We provide water to Southern Arizona, but yet, why is it we don't have access to power in our tribal nation?
That's really important. And so it seems like you're trying to get a message out, and I hope to help you do that, that the Indigenous people in this country deserve the same attention that we're giving to countries elsewhere, that we're saying they need solar, they need water, we need to help them prepare for climate change. The same questions, and why aren't we addressing that here in the US on our tribal lands?
Right. And I think there's, a deep heritage that we have as Indigenous peoples to offer. We've always been here. Mm-hmm. Our whole worldview is about, honoring our Mother Earth, honoring all elements around us. we know and understand the mountains, everywhere. We know and understand the waters everywhere and the land. We have a connection. I think when we talk about the solutions piece, there is just great traditional, indigenous knowledge of knowing and understanding what are the solutions. And I think there has been a big gap that I think we can offer as indigenous peoples, and that's what we carry and that's what we hold. And I love that about all indigenous peoples around the world, not just here in the U.S. but all over. When we come together, when it comes to like climate change negotiations, there is this real similarity in the way we are and the way we live and what we're trying to protect, because that has given us the strength to be who we are and become. But I also think that there is just a lack of resources supporting these movements that are really grassroots led, that are female led, indigenous led, that need so much support, even within this like clean energy movement. Most biodiverse areas are on indigenous lands. 80% of the natural resources, like fossil fuels, are near or on indigenous peoples' lands worldwide. I mean, if we are trying to talk about solutions and cutting down carbon emissions, if we are trying to also promote clean energy, we also need to be supporting the frontline communities and indigenous peoples with their solutions.
How can we do that? How can we support your groups? How can we support you? How can I teach this work, I do activism, I write, I'm communicating this information to the world. And as someone who cares, what's the best way that I can help and support your work?
I think just, recognizing, I think the first thing is saying that there's voices and there's solutions from indigenous peoples and all the circles that we find sometimes ourselves as activists, whether it's in the environmental movement or the clean energy movement, and the people who are fighting for climate justice, that there's frontline communities that actually really need support. For our work, it's blackmesawatercoalition.org. And, if you go to our website or our Facebook, it's, we have a lot of our programs there, and we're launching this amazing youth leadership, mentorship institute that's going to be happening this summer. So we're trying to also work on our movement building within, the Southwest for indigenous young people to be able to learn the skills that we have learned, and be able to provide the support if they do want to do organizing in their communities.
Excellent. And so what are some of the other issues? You talked about solar. I know a big issue is water and safe water. And, actually I have a question for you. I want to retract that, where I was going with that for a minute. How is it that Peabody is on tribal lands? And what right do they have to be there? And if you, as a tribe, didn't want them there, is a way that you could have them leave? Or is that not an option?
I think at the time, we didn't have, Peabody came around back in the 1960s, and as they were exploring, and at that time we didn't have, Navajo lawyers. We didn't have the best, I think our capacity wasn't all there to really make an informed decision on why we should or not, do mining in our communities. And there wasn't proper translation to really explain. I think Peabody did not explain the at scale of how much they would be mining. And I talked to a resident there a few years back that works and also lives very close to the mining operations. And when he said when Peabody first came, there was, we thought it was just like a pitchfork and, a little tiny wagon we would take into the hills. And by the time they agreed, and even our tribal leaders agreed, we had a huge, they were using explosives, it was coal, what do you call it, surface mining, and they had no idea. I don't think they understood what they were getting themselves into. And so now we have 50 years of mining in our homelands. Peabody got away with using our pristine groundwater, the Navajo aquifer, to transport coal to Nevada. I mean, it's the only form of transportation that you hear of using water, and other coal is delivered by train. And I think these are all that, we have so many stories about Peabody and the deceit, and how water and power is, in the Southwest is all been, created by deceit. And, this is something we're all learning, and I think you'll find the same stories in other communities where they're facing extractive industries like Peabody, whether it's fracking industry or whether it's like the oil industry. Very similar stories of how corporations have gotten into, tribal lands or indigenous peoples' lands, and be able to extract as much as they want and have more rights, and I think for a large part of our tribe, we've also built, our tribal revenues off the resources. And so it's a hard one because a lot of my family works for the mining operations. And so when you talk about just transition, you also are talking about people that you know really well. These are people are in your community, in your family, which is, I think, different if you live somewhere else and you're not connected to that community. And I think for most indigenous peoples who have extractive industries in their backyard, that's what we have to deal with, is like going, not having the different views with our own relatives that work for the mining industry.
So it isn't, you're not
it's a
all
sensitive
agreed.
topic.
Yeah, it's complicated. So you're not all agreed, let's just get rid of Peabody. There are people who engage in it, who believe in it, or making money from it, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And now with Peabody filing for bankruptcy, I really don't know what this means for the mine in our community. We have about 6,000 to 8,000 megawatts of coal-fired power plants on or around our reservation. 6,000, maybe more, and that's just, and I think it's just, people just don't know how much power also tribal nations carry and have when it comes to electricity and generation of power to supply water for all of our homes. A lot of it's through canals. All of southern Arizona gets their water from the Central Arizona Water Project, and that is diverted from the Colorado River. Same for California. It's all being diverted from long distances, and it takes power to move that water. And so the more you learn about where your energy comes from is something that I think I want to push everybody to be able to be more proactive and to control your own destiny. Whoever controls your water controls your destiny. That's what we've learned. Whoever controls your power controls your destiny as well. And I think with the rural electrification, we want to design this program so that we are showing people that you can own your own solar panel, and you can design it in a way so that you can track how much power you use. And so you form this relationship of like your consumption, but also, one piece we're designing is to also understand our cultural, teachings around the sun, the knowledge that the sun has been giving us for since beginning of time. And I think that's the beauty in like how we can, as indigenous peoples can, design the way that we are creating these solutions to be applicable to the communities we come from, and be sensitive to the communities we come from. So,
are you sensing?
But it's also learning for everybody. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh yeah.
Are you sensing that your community will come together around solar as an option?
It's hard to. It's going to take. It's taking small steps. We're working with a number of people that are in organizations and foundations that are wanting to put in a project, a community building to go solar. And that's exciting because I'm learning kind of the process of like what you have to do to prepare for something like that, and really talking through with our tribal leaders of like, I need your utility usage for 12 months, and they're like, why? Yeah, and it's like to design a system. And so it's, this communication I'm learning, and I think the more we engage with our community people, the more, they'll build their capacity to understand. And, it's something that I'm dedicated to, and actually going to be, working with collaboratively with a lot of indigenous peoples, not just in Navajo, but everywhere else, that wants to look at, pushing for clean energy in our communities and make it available and affordable. Right now, solar is, only marketing to people who have, who actually are wealthy. And what about the low-income people and families throughout America? And with indigenous peoples or tribal nations, most of us are really, low income or no income. And if we design a product, what does that look like? How can we make it affordable for our people to go renewables?
Here's a bit of a provocative question. Do you feel, and I know other people have talked about, this question of the environmental movement being too white, and then of course, the big money goes to the big greens. And it would one way, an obvious way to me, and maybe it's already happening, I don't know, would be that those groups would share a little bit of their wealth and shift some of that funding to groups like yours. Grassroots, indigenous groups, and that sort of thing.
Yes, I think that has been one lesson that I've learned in the past 15 years of, we started our organization as a student organization, all out of pocket, and for many years, many years, I don't even know how many years we were just getting donations from our family, people who were passionate about protecting our groundwater. But we soon found out it was going to be a hard, long haul. We are up against a huge industry, and how do we, support just transition? And I think, learning about and asking enviro groups for support and guidance, we definitely have had some great collaborations in the past, but we also saw a lot of, and we continue to see the divide. And, my hope is that that the green movement, and even it's not just there, it goes to the foundations, it goes to philanthropists that are unaware of what local means, what grassroots means, what indigenous peoples mean, frontline communities of extractive industries. What does that mean, and who's leading the fight? Many times it's it's couples, it's grandmothers, it's student organizations, and I think those are the places that have this spark and have this because it's their homeland, it's their children's land, it's their future. And when something as big as these industries are threatening your way of life and your also your children's and future generations' ability to stay on land and enjoy all the beautiful historic cultural places of that, I think that's what we bring, or definitely for me, and what my drive has been, is because I want to be able to have my children and their children enjoy this land like I've enjoyed, and understand the connection to land and all living things, that it's not just one particular area, it's our connection to everything. And with the big greens, I think there's still much more education that needs to be done, and real discussions about how to best support us rather than them hiring somebody for us.
Exactly.
or parachuting into our communities, which we continue to see today. And I think challenging foundations and philanthropists to really go an extra distance to come out and visit our communities and come out and understand that, not all of us can, whip up a 501c3, and what are some other strategies of supporting frontline communities. So that, yeah, I see a lot of how hard it can be too, even as a small organization, to keep up with reporting, to grant, fundraise, do grants. And these are all kind of the necessary steps we had to go through, and
Exactly.
we had a lot of growing pains. But now we are at a place where we are designing, something now for our young people to be able to participate in and build more of our capacity and a movement, and I think that's very awesome.
Yeah.
That we are also in kind of in a place where we have the ability to design, and without anybody telling us what we should be doing, that we can design a program that is specific to our young people and our, our communities, and, in a respectful way.
Thank you so much. We have to end, but
Okay.
I wanted to just really thank you, because I think that I know, I teach sort of the history of the environment and environmental literature, and when we get to the section on Native American people and indigenous peoples in the U.S., and we look at environmental justice and environmental degradation, students are shocked. They think of the issues around indigenous people as being something that happened a few hundred years ago, and it's a great tragedy, but it's over. And they don't realize that some of the worst cases of environmental degradation are ongoing, that this colonization is ongoing, and that even well-meaning big green groups often forget the issues around people of color and indigenous people in this country. So I spoke recently with Dr. Bullard, the father of the environmental justice movement, and he reminded me again that indigenous people are really some of the hardest hit in the U.S. And we must not forget this, and it's sort of got unfortunately, it's a bell that needs to be repeatedly sounded, and people still don't hear it loudly enough, as you know. So I thank you so much for coming on and being a voice, and I hope you'll come back again. And I wish you so much luck with this solar project. I want to hear more about it. And so everyone should go to your website, Black Mesa Water Coalition. It's lots of things going on, lots of ways to support the community and the indigenous work here. There's obviously many other issues involved with environmental degradation and Native Americans in the U.S. And I encourage everyone to learn, to make that effort, to not just go and, if you're going to give your dollars or your time to the bigger movements, but also look for the frontline communities. Idle No More is another one. There's many of them, and they need our support. And these are important, and they affect all of us. We need these places. We need to restore them, take care of them. They're central to who we are and our ecosystems. So thank you, Wahleah. So wonderful having you on our show today, and this is a vital issue. As we spoke, most people are really unaware of the environmental degradation on Native American lands, and you're doing really important work there. So thank you so much, and we hope to have you back on.
Thank you.
And really great luck with the solar projects. We'll be watching out for it. So Heidi Hutner with Coffee with Hx2, with Wahleah Johns from the Black Mesa Water Coalition, doing frontline work on water protection, land rights, helping indigenous peoples, Navajo land, and really exciting work. We'll look forward to what she ends up doing with her community, with the possibilities of solar power and cleaning up the brownfield lands and so on. So thank you, and see more of our shows on HeidiHutner.com.